Good morning, Grinders. Welcome to the DFS pregame show here on RotoGrinders. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderEd, Blender HD. If you want to follow me on Twitter, and it's Monday, January 30th, and you know what we do on Mondays? Bringing James McCool. Mondays with McCool. James McCool, the co-author with me on the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com, as well as the advanced players course, which includes James's custom Excel tools, which we'll be talking a little bit about today. Good morning to the chat. Wataz, Defect, Daniel Hutchings, Matt Mears, Matt Kajeski. Give me those thummy thumbs. You know how much I like those in the morning. Wakes me up. So hit that thumbs up, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. James, tools. I want to talk about tools, right? Not idiots, right? Not people ask stupid questions. They're tools also. But we offer in the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports for advanced players a bunch of these. We call it custom Draftkings tools, although they do work for FanDuel, but they're designed primarily for Draftkings, such as a single lineup optimizer, lineup simulator, portfolio trimmer, portfolio correlation matrix, the duplication checker, the contest reviewer, the contest history analyzer. I've showed off a bunch of this stuff on the show the past couple of months. But the purpose of tools, the purpose of lineup HQ, right? The purpose of lineup HQ. Now, obviously, lineup HQ, contains like all the projections. Like you don't need necessarily the tool, right? Like I could just download the CSV of all the projections from RotoGrinders. We have a table, we have a page with all this information on it already. But obviously, if you want to build lineups in bulk or quicker, or have a certain, types of lineups you want to see, I mean, obviously doing it by hand is going to take a pretty long time. So I always consider tools to have one of two purposes. One, efficiency. Two, accuracy. But from a macro level, tools aren't necessarily there to like, here's the right answer. Like, put in the magic settings, and there you go. You solved everything. What do you consider the purpose of tools?
So I look at tools have different purposes, right? Most of the time, what you're doing when you're developing a tool or putting something together, you're trying to make your process more efficient one way or another. So when you look at what an optimizer is a tool that makes you more efficient at building your lineups. It doesn't mean that it's giving you the best lineups, period. Like it's giving you the highest median projected lineups, but you can do that yourself too. Like you can hand build that stuff. There's no problem with that. Same thing as a calculator. It's just a tool that makes it so that you are faster and more efficient at putting things together in the way that you want to for your entire portfolio to attack slate, or for one lineup. Even if you're just optimizing one lineup, if that's what your purpose is, then your purpose is just to efficiently create that one lineup, make it as quickly as possible, and replicate your own process and your own preferences using a tool. So a lot of the time it has to do with efficiency. Sometimes it has to do with finding trends or looking for patterns that you as a person can't pick up, as easily or at all. Something that the portfolio correlation matrix aims to achieve is something that I think a lot of people struggle to do just ad hoc and without a tool. Looking at how many of your lineups are correlated between two certain players, so that you're not overexposing yourself to those specific players, right? So that's the other purpose of the tool, I think, is to find things, specifically patterns that humans are really, really bad at picking up. So,
and we're not talking about patterns in like player performance. We're talking about patterns in lineup building. So, for instance, you mentioned the portfolio correlation matrix. Like that's one of the most useful tools in the Theory of DFS. I use it for two purposes. The main purpose is to inspect your own lineup portfolios to make sure that the diversification that you want is aligned with your lineups, so that the common example we give is like in baseball,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, I want to play 50% of this pitcher and 50% of that pitcher, right? People use exposures to, they go like, they build with the lineup builder too much through exposure and not look at specific lineups. So let's say pitcher A, 50%, pitcher B, 50%. Like, you could have 50% of both and have them in 100 lineups, have them in no together, right? You could have pitcher A in 50 and pitcher B in 50, and that's 50% of each. You could have pitcher A and pitcher B both together in 50 of your lineups, and then the other 50 have neither of them together, right? Still 50% of your lineups have pitcher A and 50% of your lineups have pitcher B. So, like, if you're just going by exposures, you'd never realize that either those two players are highly correlated to each other in lineups or not at all. So, like in the first instance, 50% pitcher A is in 50%, pitcher B is in 50%, but they never overlap. The portfolio correlation matrix would show that the R is 0. Mm-hmm. Even though you have 50% of each, they're never in a lineup together. The other situation, you'd have an R of 1. Be like, you have 100 lineups, but pitcher A and pitcher B are a correlation of 1, which means they're in every lineup together. So you're able to see that type of stuff. It could be pitcher A in this shortstop. It could be in basketball. These Thomas Bryant and Deontay Murray happen to be like, you're playing 20 lineups and 15 of your lineups have both of those two guys together. And you're like, well, do I want all of my lineups or most of my lineups to have these two, or do I want to separate them out a little bit more? That's something you could check with the portfolio correlation matrix. But the other thing that you could do with it is run other people's projections, aggregate projections, run common construction types, and then build out 300, 1,000 lineups and go through and go, what is the field? A lot of people that have this guy are overwhelmingly going to have this other guy in the lineup also. Or if you're going to pay up at point guard, you're going to have a lot of cheap centers. You know, they're very much correlated to each other. And once especially if those two players are over-owned, you'd be like, well, this is something I want to do less of, right? And if you maybe less of to the point where you don't want to have any, and that's when you set up like a group that says, like, don't play this guy and that guy together. You could still play plenty of both of those guys, but since you're not playing them together in common constructions, you're now playing still similar projected and similar owned lineups, but combinatorically, they're not as owned together. So that's the purpose of that tool. And from an efficiency standpoint, good luck trying to do that on your own,
right?
In 100 lineups, right? I mean, like, good luck trying to do that on your own. It's for efficiency. It's something you can figure out on your own. You can. It just takes longer.
And that's
right.
That's
so isn't that the purpose of the tool?
Yeah, that's a really hard thing to do too. So a lot of the time, because I don't build that many lineups. So when I build tools, usually I have myself in mind of people who are not building a whole bunch of lineups. Now, building out these tools with Jordan was a nice perspective because Jordan plays more lineups, right? Like, and Jordan, nowadays you're playing less lineups. Your portfolio is usually less than 50 lineups, but beforehand, you have the perspective of somebody who builds out a whole bunch of lineups. So that's where this knowledge using portfolio correlation matrix, like, I would not have thought of this, because I can look at 5 or 6 or 7 lineups and be like, I have way too much of these two pitchers together. I need to split them up. But
if you want to do that, I want to highlight the fact that you can do that. It's just a matter of.
And I was just going to say too, that, like, it's not right or wrong to do this way. Remember, the idea is to build out lineups that fit your preference and the way that you think the slate should be attacked. If you are okay with having 50% of 2 different pitchers and having them all in the same lineups together and have an R of 1, that's fine. Like, do your thing, build your portfolio.
A lot of people, James, what ends up happening is they don't realize it.
Right. That's the
what ends up happening is that it's an MLB slate, and it's like, well, I played pitcher A and pitcher B both in 50% of my lineups. And then they go, well, pitcher A just put up like 58 points, or, they pitched a perfect game. And it's like, well, I have half this guy, so I should be great. But the other 50% guy got killed, and it's like, oh, they're all in the same lineups together. And I didn't intend on, and if you intended on it, that's one thing. But a lot of times it's like the pitcher did well. I've tons of him, and it turns out that pitcher's only in like the stack that went off that you have 20% of just doesn't contain that pitcher at all because of price. Consider like the way that everything worked out, and you didn't realize it, and maybe you would have wanted to have a little bit more diversification between those players, and just by looking at exposures, you're not going to notice that unless you look at the actual lineups. And hey, do you want to go through every single one of your lineups? No, I'd rather just throw it in an Excel tool and go, show me. But I use it even for the smaller field stuff, for the less lineups. Like if I'm building 10, 15, I still want to throw in, it's like, okay, what is the field going to do? Right. And then take a look at the correlations between lineups that the field is going to do, because a lot of people, for the main purpose, is a lot of times people use the tools wrong, right? They use optimizers wrong. They don't do any part of this process. They go, well, I'm just going to let the optimizer tell me what to play. And it's like, that's not the purpose of tools. The tools there, the tools there as a hammer and nails. And it's like, well, what do you want to build? And if your answer is, I don't know, you tell me what to build. What is the hammer and the nails going to do? It's like, no, tell me you're building a bookcase, and let's build a bookcase quicker than not having a hammer or a nail. So I think that's the main purpose of tools. No matter what you build, I don't believe, James, anything that you build, and you build a lot of tools even outside of Theory of DFS. You build for your pay dirt. None of those tools are like you press a button and you get an answer, right? And then this is the solved problem, and you're good, and that's it. No thought required.
I think that the most recent tool that I built, and I see a couple questions in the chat that we'll get to towards the end of this after we're done like talking through this stuff. So don't worry about that. We're not ignoring you. The most recent tool that I built, it's an NBA pivoter where like you can look. And it's using pay dirt projections right now, but soon I'll be able to have an upload into it so that you can see with your own projections too. But you can pick a player, like say TJ McConnell has been somebody who I've been running recently. And I usually will look at the chalk, but you look at TJ McConnell and you enter him in, and then you say how many points plus or minus you want away from him, and how much salary you want plus or minus away from him. So if he's 6,000 and projects for 30 fantasy points, and you say 3 points up and down, then it'll look for players that are within 33 to 27 fantasy points, and $300 from 5,700 to 6,300, right? So you run that, and then it'll tell you, okay, well, here's a list of players that you could pivot to and their ownerships and everything like that. And it actually simulates out what all that players are. It develops a range of outcomes table for it, right? So that
very similar. Essentially, what it's doing is similar to the lineup simulator we have,
right?
But just with those players in that range,
right? Exactly. So it'll do that, and that's really powerful for NBA, because if you do that, and say with TJ McConnell, like TJ McConnell was 5,700 and projected for like 38 fantasy points the other night, and so if you put him into this pivot finder, nobody is even close, right? So that is somebody that's probably the only tool I think that I've built in recent memory where it, like, if there are literally no other pivots to this incredible value, then I think that gives like a pseudo answer of you should just play this guy. But the vast majority of the time when you build a tool, all it's doing is saying, hey, how do you want to build? Let's make that a little bit faster. Let's make your process a little bit more efficient, so that instead of spending an hour, you can build out a suite of tools that makes it so that you can now spend just 10 minutes on, right? And I think that we achieved that really well with Theory of DFS. In the tools that we put together, took your MMA process, Jordan, your specific process, from like 45 minutes down to like 15. And that's awesome, because that is, one, ROI on your time investment, and two, it makes it so that you can react to things quicker, and you can make it so that you can handle a bunch of other things quicker. If you're playing, say that it's like Sunday, and God forbid you're playing the esports slates, but say that you're playing all of the different esports stuff, and you're playing NFL, and you're playing NBA, right? Like you have all of these different things going on. If it takes you 45 minutes per sport, you're not going to be able to handle all of it. But if it takes you 5 to 10 minutes per sport, then you can manage all of that stuff in a more efficient manner. So I think that most of it, you nailed at the beginning, is about efficiency, but it is also mostly about taking your process and the thing that you want to do and the lineups that you want to build and achieve, and making it so that you can do that more effectively. And there's no right or wrong answer in how you want to build the lineups, but the tools are there to make it so that you can build them faster.
But even from an accuracy standpoint, a lot of times this season in NFL, I'd look through and go, like, this game is going to be really low owned, and it has a low total or whatever, and I'll just go through and I'll lock in lineups with like a 3+1 or something type of stack, and then run 300 lineups, and then throw them into Portfolio Trimmer for Theory DFS, and see what are the under-owned and over-owned players that have to be part of those lineups to keep the projection as high as possible. And sometimes I get to a point where it's like, yeah, the only way that this 3+1 is viable is if I jam in all the chalk. And then I have to decide, out of my 18 lineups that I'm playing on this slate, do I want to spend one that looks like this? And then sometimes I come to sometimes there's better opportunities, and I go, nah, I'm not gonna waste a lineup here. Jamming in the one-off Garrett Wilson and the one-off David Montgomery chalk, or right, because that's the only. If I don't jam in that chalk with this stack, like, the projection just goes down too far. For like the spy or power sweeps that I'm in, but I'm doing that more accurately rather than just go, well, I want this, so I'm just going to play it. It's like, well, no, let me inspect this further. And then sometimes I get and like, oh no, I could play with the portfolio using the smart trim function in the portfolio trimmer. I'm like, wow, I actually could play lineups with this contrarian stack and still not have to jam in all the chalk. Like, yeah, one or two pieces, but I could still have a good combinatorial ownership outside of that I'm not just, I'm not playing 30% on guys in the rest of my, I'm not playing like 1% on guys, but because the stack is low owned, but I'm inspecting those types of considerations, those strategic considerations, using the tools so much quicker. I could do it in Lineup HQ. I could build 300 lineups and then manually go through and go, let me get rid of this lineup and that lineup, and let me see what the exposures look like. Oh yeah, I'm getting a lot of Christian McCaffrey in these types of lineups. You could do all of that. That's what I used to do. I used to do all of that. I mean, that's the main thing. I used to do all of that to come to these conclusions of what types of lineups do I want to play, with what are my candidate lineups, because you could play tons of lineups, and then which ones that I want to go with on this given slate. But that would normally take me like 45 minutes to an hour, right? Now it takes me 5 to 10 minutes. I mean, depending on the sport, I'm expecting going into MLB season, James, that, I mean, 6:30 Eastern, easily done by 7, and I'm done. And that's MLB DFS for the entire day. Just 30 minutes max. I mean, and it could probably be even short, probably 15 minutes, or something like that. Especially on larger slates, if I want to build out bigger portfolios and stuff like that. If I'm doing my 3 lineup type of process with the double up lineup, the triple up 3x, 5x lineup, with I'm trying to set up something in Excel to kind of use the lineup simulator to choose the lineup that I'm going to do for the 3x, 5x.
I've got something for you coming this MLB season for that.
Okay. Because I want, because obviously the double up lineup is going to be just basically median optimal. So that's 2 seconds. I'm going to play that no matter what. But it's that 3x, 5x lineup and the single entry lineup where it's like, I need a way to basically convert ownership plus projection and go how much projection am I giving up and how much ownership am I losing? And give me like within a certain range, whatever the best proportion of that is, without giving up that much projection, right? Because I'm still only giving up maybe 5 points in projection at max, and then show me show me the 10 lineups that fit that parameter the best, which I could use the portfolio trimmer for. But I almost wanted the lineup simulator and the portfolio trimmer kind of almost in one tool. To kind of show me that at once, and then trim out the lineups that don't fit the right proportion of ownership. And then it probably leaves me with play one of these 4 lineups. I'd be like, okay. And then at that point I could just close my eyes and pick one.
Yeah, I'm really excited for baseball season for all of this kind of stuff. I think that the portfolio determiner was built for baseball. Basically, it's like a perfect tool for it. The other thing, and this is blasphemy coming from a degenerate here, but I like to use the tools to decide if I'm going to play a slate or not. Like yesterday, I used the tools and I was trying to build out, and I was talking through my thoughts in the Discord, and I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, I want to fade Christian McCaffrey here because I knew that Christian McCaffrey's going to be like 1,000,000% on, right? And I used the tools and I was building out, and I was like, okay, what's the best lineups that I can build here without Christian McCaffrey? And I went through on the portfolio trimmer, I went through on the lineup simulator, and I'm looking through it, and I'm like, all these lineups suck without Christian McCaffrey.
It was only a 2-game slate, though, right?
Yeah, but it was so hard. Like I like to use the tools to try to see if there is leverage that I can gain that I'm okay with, for the most part. Like I'm okay feeling uneasy here and there, but yesterday, like the process that I would usually go through is, okay, I'm going to build a bunch of lineups without Christian McCaffrey, and I'm going to see what the projections are and what ownership looks like. And I'm going to see specifically if thematically the lineups make sense in terms of giving me ceiling production from the rest of the players, because I do care about that in NFL. And the lineups with Christian McCaffrey, one, projected like 9 points better than all these lineups just to start. And then after that, you're looking at the lineups and you're like, oh, okay, cool. So I have Patrick Mahomes with Isaiah Pacheco and Miles Sanders, and then like 3 other Eagles players that it just didn't make sense. So using the tools when I was building out, it lets me look at, after I've trimmed out and I have like 30, 35 lineups to look at, I'm looking at these lineups and I'm like, I don't know. If these are the lineups that I have for the slate based on my process, I'm not touching this slate. So I didn't play yesterday. And it felt great because I didn't have to deal with it. The lineups that I would have played yesterday were going to be Eagles and San Francisco stacks. So I'd have gotten shot one way or another. And I like using that process to decide if I'm going to play your slate or not. Because contrary to popular belief, you don't have to play every slate.
You don't? You don't have to play every slate?
You don't have to play every slate. If you think that you don't have an edge that you want to be able to exploit, you don't have to play that slate. I tell people that all the time, especially in baseball season, because baseball season can beat you down into the ground. If you go on like a 3-week losing streak, you are out of your mind and you're just tilted for the rest of the season. So it's good to take slates off. I think it's good to take slates off.
No, to me, NBA is where you take the slate. I'm taking seasons. I'm taking the whole season.
No, NBA, I don't care, because as soon as we get into what happened last night, or actually, no, it wasn't last night. It was who was it? It was Max Struss, I think, goes for a career high at like 80% owned or something after averaging like 0.6 fantasy points per minute. After that, I was like, cool, I'm done. So I don't take slates off in NBA because I know that about midway through January, there's going to be a slate that happens where something so stupid and tilting happens that I'm just done. And that's all.
Let's get to some questions in the YouTube chat. If you have any questions about the purpose of tools or anything about what James does with the tools. Mm-hmm. Julio G asks, is it possible? I mean, I'm assuming it's possible to build a portfolio correlation matrix for 3 players, because we do it for 2. We'll show you 2 by 2.
Yeah. So yes, it is, but not in Excel. Not really. Like,
you could do it. No, I mean, obviously you could do it quickly in Python, but I mean, in Excel, it would take too long.
It would be, so there's 2 things here. One, in Python, I can just run a combinatorics equation, right? Like it's not that hard in Python, but in Excel, the way that I had to set it up and the way that the portfolio correlation matrix is built is it is creating a table based on transposing the different players within your entire portfolio, right? So it's pulling in all of the uniques, and then it is building out and transposing those and then building a table of all the players next to each other, right? So first off, when you do that with 2 players, that's okay. That's not the biggest deal. But when you do it with 3 players, now you have that extra layer. And I don't know if you guys have ever tried to run more than like 500 lineups in portfolio correlation matrix. It can take like 5 minutes because the math is like pretty brutal and you have to brute force a lot of it because Excel is dumb. If you were to do 3 players, I think just doing a portfolio of like 250 players would probably take like 10 minutes or something. And it just doesn't make sense from the time investment standpoint. Sure, you could do it, but the energy expenditure for it just is not worthwhile. Like
I was gonna say instead of that, inside the tool, there's a table that it's called variance factor. Now James made variance factor as far as these are the players that contribute the most to this portfolio, which means like if you're gonna root for people, the ones with the highest numbers are the ones that are in most of the lineups, but the people that are at the top of the list are most likely in the lineups together. So like the highest, if you have in the portfolio correlation matrix tool as part of theory of DFS, if you have, a player with the variance factor 0.35, another one 0.33, another one 0.28, another one 0.24, and then the next one is like 0.10, and then 0.08. Like those top 4, most likely those 4 players are going to be in a lot of lineups together, or 3 of the 4 players are going to be a lot of lineups together. So you get that information on, are these 3 players in a lot more lineups? And you may have 30% of some other guy and their variance factor may be like 0.08,
right?
Which basically means that, they may be in 30% of your lineups, but they're not in as many lineups with all these other people at the top, that your whole portfolio is not as, the variance of your portfolio is not all as dependent on that one player. So the variance factor table in that tool is not necessarily built based on exposure, but based on your total portfolio, like the success of your entire portfolio are based around the highest variance factor players. So you can almost use that as a proxy of, well, if there's 3 or 4 players heavily towards the top of that list, you could pretty much say that those 3 or 4 players are probably in lineups together with one another.
It also kind of comes down to like, if so much of DFS these days is about 1v1s and 2v2s, that a 3v3 thing to measure that out is like, if you use a 3v3 correlation matrix, I think you would end up just rebuilding your entire portfolio to the point where you would miss out on a lot of what you built in the original one. It would reset so much of what you were doing that it would almost only be useful if you were building like a really large field portfolio and you were accepting a lot of variance. So I don't think there would be necessarily all that useful.
And definitely not useful for the time in Excel that it would take.
Absolutely not. No. Because think about it, like in NBA especially, right? Like you get news 12 minutes before slate locks. And like if you wanted to try to run something with a 3-person portfolio correlation matrix, like it's done after lock.
Even the regular one I wouldn't do. I mean, it's even waiting for 3 minutes or something. I'm not.
That's hard,
right? Matt Mears asks, a while back, James talked about using a, quote, staircase method for systematically estimating ownership for smaller contests using the large field projections. Any chance this becomes a new tool for theory of DFS?
Probably not for theory of DFS, but it is something that I think would be cool to add as a tool over at PayDirt. So like, if you guys haven't checked out PayDirt, I have a whole bunch of tools over there and I continue building because that is my site. And I do like taking on these kind of like considerations and ideas from the community, because I think that, again, I'm a man of the people. I build things for people to find more efficiency, right? Like that's what I like to do. So something like that, I think if you wanted to be able to upload ownership projections and say, here's the size of the contest, blah, 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 I would have to do a lot of back testing on it, but I think it'd be kind of a cool thing to build out.
What is it? What is this staircase method?
So I think I talked about it on the show. When you take in ownership projections, a lot of them are built for the largest field contests, right? And trying to build out something for, say, the SPY or like 555 or something like that, those ownership projections don't really work out very well because they're more condensed in the smaller fields, right? So what I do is I kind of do, I guess we could call it an exponential weight, where the players that are higher owned based on a certain threshold then begin to gain more and more ownership as you go up. So if the highest owned player is projected to be 45% owned in large field contests, then they are going to get the largest exponential bump up to something like 70% owned in small field. And then if there's like another cohort of guys that are like 30% owned, all of them are probably going to be bumped up to between 40 and 50%. And then as you go down that, like that exponential weight is going to be less and less. So then the guys that are projected to be like 10% owned, if they're well below the average, say the average ownership of a player is going to be like 15%. If you have a cohort of guys in the 10% range, those guys then drop into like the 5% range. So it spreads out based on the average. I called it a staircase because it's easier to understand and like to think about the way that works, but it's actually exponential. It just gets parabolic.
I call it barbell. I don't know if that's the correct way to think about it, but I think that barbell wise, that in smaller field contests, in higher stakes contests, typically which are smaller field, that the ownership, if you're using large field ownership projections, if you compare to large field contests, that the chalk will be chalkier.
Yeah.
The low owned players will be even more like the 1% owned players will be almost not owned.
Yeah.
And the middle isn't going to change much.
Right.
So when you said that average, it's like what if the average player ownership is 10% on a player, like anything that's around like between like in the large field contest, if we see like 8 to 12% owned players, they'll probably be 8 to 12% owned also in small field. But a 5% owned player in large field will be like 2% owned in small field. And the guys that are like 20% owned will be like 26% owned. But the high owned guys, the 45% owned guy, maybe 70%.
Right.
Like it is exponential, but as far as which players it affects, it looks more like you said, parabolic. It's like once you get closer to the average ownership, those kind of players in the middle don't really change that much. It's really a lot of the ownership come from the heavily chalky players comes out of like all of the low owned players at once, because like in large field, you may find someone that's like 0.75% owned. They're literally unowned.
Yeah.
In the small field. Or you find someone that's 1.5% owned and they're like in like one lineup.
Yeah.
Like they're 0.07%. Like so all of that little ownership here is typically just going all the way to the top, all the way to the top, all the way to the top. And then that kind of the mid-range doesn't change all that much.
Yeah. So if you were to visualize it in like the application of this and like the way that I do it, because I do it for NBA projections and for NHL projections over at PayDirt. When you're considering the size of the contest, if you're looking at like the normal large field of being just like that diagonal, right? Like linear, then you just kind of like, as you start to get smaller, you start to kind of like widen it out and then eventually become like super parabolic, like where the average players at that point, the ownership doesn't even matter. Like at that point in small field, you're pretty much just looking at, okay, who are the top 6 to 10% owned players? And like, those are the only guys that you're really going to be caring about when you're making decisions on the slate. And we've talked about that a lot. We talk about that in Theory DFS of making decisions based on the most valuable portions of the slate. That's where it really becomes valuable in projecting out small field ownership.
Right. Because people ask me all the time that people would pay for my ownership. And I go, I can't really sell my ownership because I'm not changing like every play. I'm like I'm number one, I'm doing it purely by judgment, human judgment. And number two, I'm not changing everyone. Like you said, I'm changing like half the players in the player pool. I'm not even considering. So I'm not going to, this guy's going to be 2% or 3%. It's like, it doesn't matter to me. I just get rid of him. It's a matter of this 32% owned guy in large field. I think it's going to be like 48% in small. Okay, that changed. Did like the highest owned guys, and then like what's at the bottom, like where does it start going where the 6% owned guy becomes a 2% owned guy? And I may change a whole bunch, and I may just do it in bulk and just go, well, 6 goes to 2 and 5 goes to 1 and 5. And then I'm at the bottom of the playable list. Like the only players left in my player pool, I may only have like for NBA, I might only have like 32 people that are even viable for me to play anyway in small field. And then it's like, okay, once I adjust these guys, mostly the main guys, and then like I just rip off a bunch from the low, and then I'm done. Right. So it's like what can I really give you? There's that, like, I'm using that concept, but what Matt is talking about is the ability to do that more efficiently and more accurately.
Yeah. Yep. And like the other thing, and then we'll move on to the next portion of this. But the other thing is don't ask 1v1 or 2v2 questions about players that like don't matter. And when I say that, I mean, if you're asking me a 1v1 or 2v2 about two players that are both going to be like 8% owned and project within like 3 points of each other,
throw a dart against the board. Mike Tyson,
literally whatever choice you want to make. Like those players, the outcomes there, obviously the outcomes are going to be consequential of how your lineup finishes. But in terms of the process to which one you choose, it doesn't have any effect on the leverage that your lineup gains. It doesn't have any effect on the correlation that your lineup gains. It doesn't have any measurable effect on the projection that your lineup gains or loses. If you're going to ask a 1v1 or a 2v2, it needs to be able to have an effect on how good of a lineup you are making in the size of the contest that you're in. So if you're in a really large field contest and you're asking a 1v1 or a 2v2, it had better involve one of the highest popular players on the slate or a 1% owned player that you think is good. Like, give me those barbells, give me those edge cases. If you're in small field, same thing, but it needs to be even more extreme, right? Like, you need to be asking me, do I want to play this 45% owned guy or this 30% owned guy? Because like those guys actually matter for that contest. Otherwise, like, don't think too much about it.
I think getting away from thinking about DFS as 1v1s and 2v2s is, I mean, the main thing.
Well, okay, yeah, but like you're still, you do have to make those decisions up and down. Like if you have 5 lineups, you do absolutely have to make sure that you are making decisions about these different guys. Like you have to. Just don't waste the time on, like, after you have built out a lineup, you have like 7 players in your lineup, and you've come down to the last 2 or whatever.
Yeah, but that's not a way to don't perpetuate that. I won't let you.
Well, let me get to the end of this.
Okay.
If you have like 7 players and you get down to the last 2, and you are trying to make these decisions on what the last 2 are going to be, if they are not super high owned or super low owned, like, the decision that you're making likely doesn't matter that much. Like, just go off the projections and you'll be fine. That's what I'm trying to say. Because the rest of your lineup probably you have already built in however much leverage or however much relative value or however much projection you're going to have based on the bulk of your lineup. So those last 2 players, like, you spend too much time on it, and it likely doesn't matter that much. Is that what you thought?
My attitude is you never get to that point to begin with, because James, I am never looking at player slots.
You aren't, but a lot of people are, and
that's what I'm trying to teach. Stop looking at player slots. Look at lineups. I look at lineups, right. So I have all the slots in front of me to begin with. So there's nothing for me to. Do I play this guy or this guy? Who's left in my line? There's nothing. There's never anyone left in my lineup. I'm only looking at full lineups, and I could look. Maybe the 2 lineups I'm looking. James, maybe the 2 lineups I'm looking at are a 2v2 difference, but I'm not just sitting there with like a 6-player lineup in NBA going, what 2 slots are left?
Man, you're missing the point, because you build with an optimizer.
Well, that's what you should be doing. It's more efficient.
But there are plenty of hand builders out there. You're missing the point. If you build with an optimizer, obviously,
by a lineup.
If you build with an optimizer, obviously you are not deciding on the last two players in your lineup, because the optimizer already built it. But if you're hand building, you do have to make these decisions.
No, you don't. You have to think of it holistically.
You can't take 7 players and then just have it auto fill in the last 2 players. That's how this
fill in and make whatever lineups you want by hand, and then choose between those.
That's what I just said. I said the last 2 players don't matter that much.
Right, but people get too wrapped into like, well, I got 6,300 left in my utility. Who should I play? Like, if you're asking that question, then you're playing wrong. Like, then you're not thinking about lineups. You're thinking too much about players.
Right. Just play the one that projects the best because the rest of your lineup already built in the leverage and the relative value for the entire lineup. That's what I said. Listen, Jordan. Listen.
No, but you shouldn't get to that point where you're doing that anyway.
Okay, hand builders out there in the audience, you can listen to what I just said. If you build an optimizer, obviously don't listen to what I just said.
Well, that's why. What isn't the point of the show? The purpose of tools.
Yeah, yes.
The purpose of tools. The purpose of an optimizer, so you don't get into those situations where you're going, oh, do I play 1v1? You said the downfall of like spending too much time on 1v1s and 2v2s. You know how you spend the least amount of time on them? By you build all your candidate lineups with the lineup builder like you could get on RotoGrinders. If you're a premium member, click on the link on the description, get $10 off your first month, and you don't have to worry about it anymore.
There you go. That's exactly right.
See?
Conscious Machine 413. So the guys that I felt good about not playing were in the Millionaire Maker top spot. Did I realize this? I'd be crushed. Do you know how many times I have considered players that have won people millions of dollars? I've been playing for 10 years. Nothing crushes me anymore.
Right. And also, it's not about players. It's about lineups. Oh, yeah, the players I would have played. Yeah, 4 of them, but you still need to make more lineup. I mean, like, that's...
I would not have built the Millionaire Maker lineup last night. I wouldn't have. Absolutely not.
Right, because you would have had Brock Purdy and...
Well, I had Jalen Hurts. I think I was specifically trying to build around Jalen Hurts, and I did like Patrick Mahomes just because I knew that he was going to be low owned off the ankle injury. But I think I would have done okay, but I didn't really have a chance to take down GPPs last night. I would have been on the wrong.
You have to be perfect. I mean, come on.
I'd have been on the wrong combos, and that's fine.
So, anything else about the purpose of tools and? People can find, obviously, the tools that we've mentioned, most of them in the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports for advanced players. Pick that up at theoryofdfs.com. It also comes with 10 chapters of audio. I mean, like, it's not just the tools. It is an audio course. It's the advanced audio course. I would obviously suggest you take the fundamentals masterclass first. That's 15 hours. How to think like a professional DFS player before... You know, if you're used to, if you're already building with a lineup builder, if you already understand, you know, DFS concepts like correlation, leverage, what projections are, all that type of stuff, like maybe then you could go directly to the advanced players course, but you need to know the concepts first before you can apply them. So you can pick that up at theoryofdfs.com. And James, your additional stuff is at paydirdfs.com.
Yeah, paydirdfs.com. You can find me on Twitter at paydirt_DFS. I'm building out a lot of really cool stuff for baseball. I plan to have a lot of really cool like stacking tools and I already mentioned portfolio simulation tool, which is going to be really, really cool. So I'm really excited for baseball to come back. And at NBA, I have some really cool stuff over there, but we're getting into the part of NBA that just like I don't even like.
All of NBA sucks.
God, yeah, but especially after we hit February, dude.
You said that every year, but then the beginning of the season happens and 17 teams are already tanking.
I always enjoy NBA up through the middle of January. Like I said at the beginning of this. And then as soon as that something happens, middle of January happens, and I'm just like, I'm out.
Now we got what, 58 days till baseball, I think?
Yeah, pretty close. Pretty close. I'm pretty excited for it.
Right. And programming note, by the way, you won't be back for a while here. That February is going to be off and on. February, okay, just as a programming note, there'll be a show tomorrow, but then there won't be a show till the following Thursday. I am going on a cruise, so I'll be gone for a week, right? And then also in the middle of the month, there's going to be the NBA All-Star break, and that's kind of like there's not much going on, so... You know, Steve and Devin, I don't want to make them wake up early in the morning to do a show when there's like no basketball slate or nothing going on. So there's going to be a couple of days where there's no show then also. So there'll be, you know, you'll always hear me on the day before going, there's no show until whenever. And then people will DM me 14 times. Where's the show today? If you don't see a thumbnail, that means there's no show that day. So James said there won't be a Monday show for like a month.
Yeah, and that's a big bummer. I'll probably do some live streams over the next month because I'll miss it. Like this is how I start my week, you know? Like I like the Monday show. So
you don't start your week on Sundays, like on the calendar?
No, why would I do that? Insane people do that.
Yeah, but it's the first day of the week on a normal calendar.
It's
right?
not
Sunday.
the first day of the week. That's insane person stuff. And the first day of the week is Monday. Absolutely. Every single
Their week ends. Their ends of the week. So that means it starts on Sunday.
No, the weekend goes from Saturday to Sunday. That is a weekend.
Oh, okay. So weekend. It's Saturday, Sunday, and that's the end of the week.
How else
Not
would
the
you
ends, not the ends
interpret that?
plural of the week, not the
No.
weekends.
No, it is the weekend. Nobody says it's the weekends. It's the weekend.
The weekend. Okay.
Right.
How come calendars start with Sundays?
Because Julius Caesar was a cuck. I don't know, man. Because it doesn't make any sense. Like Sunday.
I agree. Conceptually, I agree with you. But why does calendars have Sundays and Saturdays?
We still have daylight savings time, Jordan. Time is a construct. Like
was the calendar invented by like DraftKings changing their like CSV format like in the middle of a season? I mean, you obviously saw that. I saw you tweeting about it.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's pretty asinine.
In the middle of a season, like why? Why even bother? Why do that now?
That there were multiple sources at the same time in the same day that changed either their CSV export or the naming conventions on players for NBA. The same day, like in the end of January, for no reason. It must have been like one of the major providers of like salaries or something like that, like a sports info or whatever, right? It must have been them making a change that all of these different companies sweep through that made this change in the middle of the season. Because I tried to run my scripts in the morning and everything shut down. It's like, no. 20 of these names don't exist. I'm like, excuse me? Because like I've been building this list for 5 years and I think I have every single possible name in here at this point. And they changed a whole bunch of juniors and seniors and the thirds and second, like it all flipped and I had to change all. That was just gross. It's so stupid. You should be sent to prison directly for that. No
good
trial.
thing you don't have to deal. You don't do any soccer stuff, right?
No, because
if you did soccer stuff, you'd bow out. That window in the back there, and you'd be jumping. I don't care if it's on the first floor. You'd be jumping out of it anyway.
Yeah, it's terrible. Like naming conventions are the bane of my existence, and anybody who builds models absolutely agrees with me that naming conventions, that there should be a universal accepted naming convention for every single player across the internet, and if you deviate, you should be sent to the gallows. Just
in soccer, and James, in soccer, DraftKings, because remember, a lot of Brazilians and Portuguese players have really long real names, and then they have their own like soccer nickname.
Yep.
DK uses their soccer nickname, but uses it for a lot of the times first name and last name. So it would be like something like Ronaldinho.
The worst that I have ever seen DraftKings do was during KBO, like during the pandemic when we were all playing Korean baseball, right? It was like borderline racist how many times they used the same name for these players. And I understand that there's a lot of overlap in first names. I get it.
Overlap and technically last names.
Right, last names. But DraftKings they had like 10 players that were all the same name. And I'm like, no. Like this you guys aren't trying hard enough, and I know that you're not.
No, everyone knows in KBO, as long as you have 5-man stack Kim, you're good, right?
It was so bad, dude.
No, I saw that. I'm like, and you'd have to go search for these starting lineups and have to go, is this Kwon Woo's son or is this Kim Min's son? Like, and everyone, if you just go by DraftKings would go by initials, and like that wasn't even good enough.
No, you had to guess at what these players' names were because DraftKings was just like DraftKings pulled a FanDuel and just said, "We're not doing that.
we don't care.
Just not doing that." You guys can go ahead and do your best, but we're not. That's not us. You guys can go have fun. We're not doing that for you.
So you can find James's tools, paydirt.dfs.com, theoryofdfs.com for the courses and the Excel tools. And obviously, you're going to need projections. You're going to need ownership. You're going to need a way to build lineups, right? You get that here at RotoGrinders. Click on the link in the description. Get $10 off your first month for a combo premium package, which gets you all the sports, right? We still got what? We got Super Bowl stuff for NFL, NBA, MLB, PGA, MMA, college basketball, soccer, Champions League will be coming back, right? With Premier League. We got everything here. So join us here. You get access to our premium Discord, which includes my Blenders Game Theory channel. Come in and talk to me whenever you want. Ask whatever questions you'd like. I do 2 or 3 Zoom coaching calls per month. And we got tons of stuff on this YouTube channel. The Scores and Odds channel for all your betting needs. Got tons of shows. We got NBA Grinders Live coming up later today. Crunch time, right before lock. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. A pretty big NBA slate tonight. And I'll be back tomorrow for more answering your DFS strategy questions, right? Like I always do here. Monday through Friday. Maybe in February, maybe not so much Monday through Friday, but most of the time, Monday through Friday at 11 o'clock Eastern on the DFS pregame show on RotoGrinders.com.